Okay, I'm going to begin. My name is Professor Carolyn Dudak. I am the Chair and Professor of Political Science at Hofstra University, and I want to thank you all for coming to this very special event. This event is co-sponsored by the European Studies Program, and for the students that are on this event, it is a minor that is offered at Hofstra University, and if it's something that may interest you, please do contact me and I'd be happy to help you with advisement. The other co-sponsors of this event are Jewish Studies and Hofstra Hillel, and I wanted to make a special thank you to Professor Santiago Slobodsky, as well as Rabbi Dave Siegel, for helping to promote this event amongst our population at Hofstra University. I'd also like to thank Dean Ben Rifkin, the Dean of the Hofstra College of Arts and Sciences, for always being so supportive of these kinds of events. I also want to thank the Hofstra Cultural Center, who is hosting this event, and especially to Carol Mallison, who did much of the promotion and the organizing for this event. So I want to thank her very much as well. And the other person that I want to thank is William Holtzman, who is our technical assistant in Canada right now in Toronto, helping with the Zoom end of this call. So before we begin, I would just like to put into context the significance of our speaker's experience and why I invited Anna Holtzman, who happens to be my great aunt, to speak with us today. If we look at what is going on in Europe today, we see an increased rate of anti-Semitism in Europe, violence against Jews, and all kinds of anti-Semitic acts. The other thing that we are seeing simultaneously is a rise in far-right political parties. And far-right political parties, their underlying ideology is founded upon anti-Semitism. They also have an anti-immigration bent to them, and nativist, populist, and in many cases, illiberal ideals. In Poland today, under a government controlled by the Law and Justice Party, the Law and Justice Party is a far-right party. It is populist. It is illiberal. It is trying to create a new narrative of World War II. And in creating that narrative, they have gone as far as to create a new piece of legislation called the Holocaust Speech Law that bans any claims of Nazi Polish collaboration during the war. And the fear that many people have is that this law could even make it a crime to discuss anti-Semitic acts committed by Polish individuals. Anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine, signaling anti-democratic forces at work. Europe is also experiencing a refugee crisis, likened in size to the refugee crisis after World War II, of which Mrs. Holtzman found herself. Her World War II experience, her post-World War II experience is very relevant to contemporary Europe. Even in the United States, we too have experienced a rise in anti-Semitism. In fact, the Anti-Defamation League has recorded the highest levels of anti-Semitic incidents since they began tracking such incidents in 1979. Just last month, the Conference of Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, in a survey, found that while there were over 40,000 concentration camps and ghettos in Europe during the Holocaust, almost half of Americans, 45%, cannot name a single one. And this percentage is even higher among millennials at 49%. 31% of all Americans and 41% of millennials believe that substantially less than 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust. They believe that maybe it was 2 million or fewer. Yet, 58% of Americans believe that something like the Holocaust could happen again. With these troubling findings, our speaker today is an important voice to be heard. And so, without further ado, in her own words, a survivor's account, my great aunt, Anna Holtzman. Anna, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm glad to be here too.
So I'm going to start out by asking you where and when you were born.
I was born in Poland, Lodz, July 17, 1927.
And can you tell me a little bit about your family, your siblings, to start out with?
I have 3 siblings. My oldest brother name was Lipek. My sister's name was Manya. And my youngest brother was Salek. And I'm the youngest one of 4 siblings in the family. And there was a big age difference in the family. When I was born, my oldest brother was 14 years old. My sister was 10, and my younger brother was 7.
So you were the baby.
I was the baby of the family.
And so can you tell me what your relationship was with your siblings growing up in Lodz, Poland?
We were all a very, very, very loving family. Everybody loves each other, including my parents. They gave us a lot of love and attention. And I didn't know anything because when the war broke out, I was 12 years old.
So can you tell me a little bit about your father? What was his name? And what did he do for a living?
My father's name was Shmuel Sherzowski, and he was designing slippers.
And what kind of a person was he?
Well, I came from a religious family. He was very loving, and he tried his best for his family.
And is there a special memory of him that you have?
Yes, I do. There were some incidences in Europe where it was anti-Semitism. As a child, my father delivered some slippers to a storekeeper, and he used to wear glasses, and he came home all beaten up, and his glasses were broken.
And this happened before the war?
This happened before the war. There were a few incidences as well. People in Europe didn't have the stores open on a Sunday. They closed the stores on a Saturday because of the Sabbath. They had no insurance, and some hoodlums came and they broke the windows. They mixed up rice with salt, with sugar and everything, and there were signs not to buy at Jewish stores.
And so this happened to Jewish businesses, Jewish-owned businesses?
Yes.
You're talking about.
And this was before the war.
And what about public places that were Jews allowed to go into any public place, like a hotel?
No, there were certain hotels, there were signs for Jews and dogs is not allowed to get in. There were some beautiful parks, and we're not allowed to go into the parks as well.
And there were specific signs that would say that?
Specific signs, yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about your mother? What was her name and what was she like?
My mother's name was Pearl, and she was a homemaker. She was very loving, and she was very caring for the family. And our family was very, very loving, and we cared about each other very much.
So what was it like growing up in Lodz, Poland before the war? What are your memories of Lodz?
I don't remember too much because I was 12 years old when the war broke out. But I think I had a normal childhood because we were very close with the family. I had a few friends. I didn't have as much as the children have here in Canada, but I was a happy child, a normal child.
And would you consider your family, were they wealthy? Were they middle class? Were they lower middle class? What would you say?
We're middle class people, and we were religious.
Prior to the war, did you begin to notice changes going on in Poland?
Well, a little bit I did, because what my parents were talking between them, that is getting bad because the anti-Semitism, the Polish people didn't like the Jews, and they'll always say this, dirty Jew, go to Palestine. We didn't have a country at the time. We had nowhere to go, so we had to stay in Poland. We had no other choice. Even the people didn't like us.
So when the war first broke out, what is your earliest memory of that? Do you remember it?
I remember September 1st, 1939, the war broke out. And right away, it was a Friday, and right away you saw hear the bombs, then we start to run to the backyard. The houses were different built than here. In the front there were some stores, and we lived in the back of the store on the houses. And we took a little bit of belongings what we had, and we were running down because there were no bunkers. And Hitler came a week later. September 8th, it was the invasion of Poland, and everybody had to stay and watch. There was a big market, and we had to stay and watch was the armies coming in, and right away they start to burn synagogues and the holy books, and they start to cut beers, the German, and it was, but everybody had, it was on a Saturday, people couldn't go to the synagogues anymore.
And so Hitler actually came to Lodz, are you saying, at that time?
Yes, September 8th, a week after the war broke out.
And when that happened and German troops were coming into the streets of Lodz, was there any thought of your family to run away?
We had no place to go. We didn't have any relatives, and it was too late. They closed the borders. You had to stay where you were.
So after the German invasion into Lodz, what became of Lodz under German occupation?
In 1940, we went to ghettos. They started to build ghettos, and everybody what lives out of the ghetto had to move in. For instance, our family, we lived out of the ghetto. We had to leave a lot of our belongings because it didn't fit. First of all, it didn't fit, and we couldn't take everything. My oldest brother got married before the war. So he lived with his wife someplace else, but later on he moved with us together because 2-3 families had to live in one room.
So it was you, all of your siblings were together with you and your parents, and then you moved to a different housing within Lodz.
Yes, we moved to a different street and to a different house.
And what did you do with all of your personal belongings that you had in your apartment?
We had to leave them behind. We took whatever we could, what it could fit to the new house, and the rest we had to leave behind. We were lucky that my father took some leather with him and equipment to make slippers. So he figured maybe he'll be able to work and sell them. But he was lucky we did.
Did you give away any of your things to your neighbors?
The neighbors came and they took them.
Without asking?
Without asking. They said, I'll have this and I'll have that, because we had beautiful antiques in the house. They just came in and they said, you won't be using them anymore. You won't need them anymore. Probably they knew where we are going, but we had no idea what will happen. When you went out for a walk and you were, so German caught you some of the time, you never came back. We didn't know where the people went.
And your father, before you left your house, what did he do with some of your special valuables?
Our valuables were there in the old house.
Did he hide them in the house?
Well, some of them we hid, but some of them the people took. Our neighbors, but we stayed there for many years. I don't remember how many years we lived in the same house.
So you then moved with minimal belongings to another house that was basically, they said you have to live in this place. Is that how it was done?
Right. And we were 6 people in one room. My brother left for Russia in 1939 because he was in the army. My younger brother,
He was in the Polish army.
He was in the Polish army when the war broke out. And when he came home, he had to leave right away with the Polish. We had to burn the Polish uniform. Otherwise, if the German will catch him, they'll kill him or put him in a camp. So he left for Russia in the same October 17th, he left.
And was your sister still with you during this time?
My sister got married in September when the war broke out. And a little while later, she left with her husband. And we had no idea where she was. So it was myself, my parents, my brother, and sister-in-law. 5 people were in one house together, in one room.
And your sister-in-law, what was her name?
Yaja.
Okay. So you now are living in this, inside the ghetto. Can you tell us a little bit about what life was like within the ghetto?
From the beginning in Ghetto, well, before we moved into the ghetto, in 1939, there were big lineups for bread and for groceries. The stores opened probably about 8 o'clock. The people were staying in line from 6 or 5 in the morning to be the first ones in. But the Germans took some Poles to help them. The German didn't know who was Jewish, but the Polish people knew because they were our neighbors, so they knew who we are. So when they opened the stores, people want to get in, but before the stores opened, the Germans were saying, "Alle Juden raus," all the Jews out from the line. Some people staying, they need the bread, they need some food. But the Polish people say, "Who's Jewish?" So they say, "Das ist Jude, he is Jewish and he is Jewish." And they start to fight with them and throw them out from the lines. This was before the ghetto. In the ghetto, we had a ration. We had little bit food, not too much. Like we always hungry, because I was hungry for 5 years. Not enough of anything.
So they would give you a certain amount, was it per week, per day, and what was that amount?
For the week. We had every week, we had a small amount of bread, some potatoes and some vegetables, not too much. Especially in the winter, everything was frozen when we went to pick it up.
And how was your health during that time period, and your family's health during that time period?
From the beginning, it wasn't too bad. But in 1943, my mother got sick. We didn't have enough food. We didn't have enough to heat a house. In the winters were very cold in Poland, the same like in Canada and the United States. And to be without the heat, it was terrible. The house we were living in, we had maybe 5 centimeters of snow in the windows, and the same thing on the walls. We had a lot of snow on the walls because the frost went right through, and you were shivering. And we didn't have too much clothes at the time as well, because we could take only so much. How much can you fit in one room? So it was bad. My mother got sick, and she passed away in 1944 for starvation, and she had lung infection. She had pneumonia.
Did you work in the ghetto, or did your family work in the ghetto?
You had to work. Everybody had to work in ghetto. By a coincidence, I had a job, handstrickerij. I used to make sweaters for the soldiers. My sister was selling slippers on the black market. My father used to make some in the house where we used to live. And my sister went on the market and sold them. So this guy came over and said, "Can I have a slipper? I think my sister would like to have a pair. Give me one. I'll give you my address and give me your address." So they exchanged addresses and I'll come for the other one. So after a week, he came back and I was sitting on the windowsill and I was knitting. I didn't know how to do it. I was 13 years old at the time. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to knit." He says, "If you like to work," because at the time you had, they start to build the Arbeitsresorts, the factories. And he says, "You'll get an extra soup." I said, "Sure, I'll go to work." So he says, "I'll tell my sister, maybe she'll need you." And after 2 weeks, he came back and he said, "You can have a job in the factory if you like." So she said, "But you have to bring your own chair." So I was dragging the chair over a bridge. Maybe I was walking by 45 minutes to get to that place. And finally I got there and I was assigned to make some sweaters. She taught me how to do it. And a few months later, more factories were built and everybody had to work. If you didn't work, you were sent away because they will stamp you, Jude. You had a stamp on your chest and they will send you away. We had no idea where at the time.
When you say they would stamp you on the chest, was it like a badge? What do you mean by that?
Well, but they stamped the same thing like they made numbers.
Oh, they would tattoo it then?
They would tattoo you, so with a stamp. And it said Jude, Jew.
So you worked in the camp you were 13 at the time?
I was 13 years old in the Lodge Ghetto. I started to work and I had an extra soup. Whatever I could get, it was okay.
So in the Lodge Ghetto, can you describe the movement that you were allowed to do within the ghetto itself? Were you allowed to leave the ghetto, or how could you move around the ghetto?
Well, we had a curfew. Nobody could go out after dark. I don't remember exactly what time, but after dark. You had barbed wires. You were not allowed to walk on the sidewalk, or you could walk only on the sidewalk, but not on the road. You had big gates. They started to build bridges. If you like to go from one side to the other, you had to go across the bridge. And the roads were only for the irons people, only for the German. Some Poles were living out of the ghetto as well. But if somebody, and you had to wear a Star of David. You went outside without the star, they would shot you.
During the time that you were living in the Lodge Ghetto, did you or any family members personally experience violence or cruelty from Nazi soldiers while you were in the ghetto?
Yes, my brother went for a walk and he was cut and he had to go, they put him he went to a library and he had to clean the toilets with a toothbrush. He was there a whole day carrying books and cleaning the stores and cleaning everything up. It was a store, what they made a library of. And he came home in the evening, he was all beaten up and he was lucky that he came back. At the time, we didn't know what will happen but we were still together. So he told us what happened. A lot of people were cut on the streets, and they never came back.
What do you mean they were cut on the streets?
Well, the German caught them and they took them, we don't know where. They never came back.
Okay, they caught them. Could you talk a little bit about what happened on Fridays and describe to us the process of selections and other things that you witnessed in the ghetto?
In 1933, there was a sparrow. You had they gave you extra food, but you were not allowed to go out for 7 days. Everything had to be closed. We were lucky because we lived in the back of the house, and in the front there was a factory, Arbeitsresort. At the time, there were people yelling and screaming because they came with big trucks. The German came with trucks. They threw all the people out. They said, everybody out, and they select us. Whoever didn't look good, all the people, and special children, they threw on the trucks. They threw children down from the windows. Those people didn't go down, and they were checking them. And the screams and everything, sometimes I could still hear how people were crying and screaming. For 7 days, nobody could move. And after that, when we went out, you couldn't see older people or children. We had no idea, still we had no idea where they went and what happened to them. They were just disappeared.
Did you also witness other kinds of violence against people that was used as a way to frighten people in the ghetto at all? Did you see any public hangings, for example, in the ghetto?
Yes, I did. There was a big market. What people used to come from the countries twice a week. It was a big place before the war, and they used to bring produce there. In the ghetto, the Germans were using it for their purposes. Whoever ran away from the camps, I have no idea how they could do it, but some people did, and they were cut and they hung them. So everybody had to go and look what the Germans are doing. And they were hanging there for maybe 6 days. And whoever passed there, there were signs. I ran away from the ghetto. I ran away from from a camp with signs. And everybody had to look at them. And they were hanging there for a long time.
How long did you stay in the Lodz Ghetto?
I stayed in Lodz Ghetto till 1944. In 1944, they started to eliminate people. My sister-in-law was taken away before we went away. They came during the night, and they stayed their name, Jaja Szersowska, and she says, you have to come with us. We had no idea where they were taking her. But later on, I found out where she was. In 1944, we had to move someplace else. The factories didn't work anymore because they closed. As soon as they closed the factories, we had to we moved in with my aunt, and there were maybe 5, 6 families in the same room. And with my father and my older brother, the 3 of us, because my sister-in-law was taken already. And we stayed there maybe for 2 weeks, but it was impossible. So, and Elster from the Judenrat, he was saying from the Jewish Congress, was saying, nothing, people pack up your things and go, we're building new factories and the families will be together. He went on a loudspeaker in a car and he said, go away. We are building new factories someplace else because the ghetto will be liquidated. And nothing, you won't miss anything. You'll just go to another working camp. And we listened to him. We believed him. So we decided we'll go away because it was impossible to be with so many families in one room. So we went, at the time, we went to the station, but as soon as we came to the station.
What kind of a station was it?
It was a regular station.
Regular train station?
Yes, the train station we went. It was regular. And as soon as we came to the train station, we saw that something is wrong. He says, you can take so many and so many pounds with you. You're allowed to. But so we took the clothes, we took whatever we could, some jewelry, whatever we had, whatever we took brought to the ghetto. And we went, and you are allowed to take two suitcases each. So we took, and we went, but as soon as we came to the station, we saw that something is wrong because they were the German, they say, hurry up, schnell, 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 hurry up, go on the station, and with dogs and everything. So we went, they put us in cattle cars and packed like sardines in a box. And we didn't know where we were going. We promised, they promised us to go to a different working camp. I don't know how long we were on the train. That was the last time I saw my brother and father.
It's okay, take a minute. So you were on this train, and was it a long ride on the train?
Quite a long. It was quite a long ride. We were back and forth like they were going to confuse us. But we looked out through the little windows and we saw people, they were free and we were in jail.
Take a minute, Chet. It's okay. Take a minute, Anna.
Anyways, when we came, we didn't know where we are. They opened the big doors and they let us out. And there were the soldiers and dogs, and Mengele was there, and he was directing to go right and go to the left.
So you had arrived in Auschwitz, is where you arrived?
We were out, yes, came to Auschwitz, and the women, men and women were separated.
So you were separated from your father?
I didn't have a chance to say goodbye to them because everything has to be in a hurry. And we were marching, we were in Auschwitz, we were marching, we didn't know where they were going to take us. We saw some people running to the barbed wires, and I was thinking that I'm in a crazy house because the people were shaved, the heads were shaved, the dresses were horrible, and they were screaming, whatever you have, give to us, because in a few minutes you look the same like we are looking now. And you saw the SS chasing them back and hitting them. And I said to a friend of mine, right, I said, where are we? What's going to happen to us? She says, I don't know.
So what did happen once you arrived in Auschwitz?
When we arrived to Auschwitz, they took us to a very, very big room, and there were only younger people because the older people have gone already. The luggage we had to leave behind. We had nothing. We had only the clothes what we had on our backs. And they said, take everything off. They started to shave the hair everywhere in my head and everywhere else, and the Germans were looking. And I was only 17 years old. I was ashamed, very uncomfortable. They gave us, we went for a shower, and then they gave me a dress, only a dress. No underwear, no bra, no shoes. That was my belonging, a dress. After everything was done, everybody was ready. We were marching to our block. I was in block 30. About 1,000 people were there. They count us 1,005s on cement. And then they said, sit down. We sit down in fives on cement floors. And that's the way we were sitting and eating and sleeping I was there for 6 weeks. All we got, 6 o'clock in the morning, they woke us up to count. They were counting us twice a day. You had a very small piece of bread in the morning, and then you had a little bit of water. That was the soup, the lunch. They gave us 1 bowl for 5 people. Everybody had to give a sip of soup, and that's the way you were sleeping. During the day, you went outside, and then I went to a different block, and I found my sister-in-law. That's where she was sent us to Auschwitz, and she was in a different block. So I asked the SS women if we could be together to exchange somebody. She said no. So had no other choice. So I saw her every day. During the day, you could go to different barracks. But at night, when they were counting, you had to go back. One morning, I woke up and I went to her block. She was in block 11, she was gone. So I was by myself again. I had no idea where they sent her.
So did you work in the camp?
Not in Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, where I was, this was a C camp, gypsy camp, Zigeunerlager. But we saw, in Auschwitz, we saw what happened, because the music was playing a whole day, the chimneys were burning, you could smell the flesh from the people.
You're describing the crematoriums, is what you said.
The crematoriums, yes.
And so were you only with the Jewish people, or were you with any other groups were with you?
Only Jewish people.
And were they only from Poland, or were they from different parts of Europe?
Well, in the block where I was, they were only from Poland. Maybe in different blocks they were from someplace else. I have no idea. Selections came every day. There were selections. The German came, and I have no idea. At the time, I didn't know where even now, I don't know, maybe they went to different working places, or they went to the crematorium. I have no idea. But they kept on sending me back. Each time I went for the selection, because everybody has to go out, they send me back. One day, my girlfriend and myself, we were selected to go, we didn't know where. There were I was with Hungarian people together at the time, because they were from different blocks as well. So there were 950 Hungarian and 50 from Poland. So they took us to Bergen-Belsen. That was the camp where people used to work. They were sent out at the time, 1940, 41, 42, 43. They were building the places. And they had numbers on their heads. I don't have one, because that was a mess. They didn't have time to do that at the time. So I don't have a number. So they took us to Birkenau and stayed there overnight. So for some reason, I don't know, I was between the lucky ones there. There was this German, and he was watching over me like an angel he was my angel. Wherever I moved, he says, "How old are you?" He asked me. He wasn't a young guy. So I said, "I'm 17 years old," in German. And he says, "My daughter is 17. She's the same age as you are." Next day, there was another selection. There was a big hole they made, and you had to jump over that hole, that you are strong enough to go to work. When it came my turn, he didn't let me go through jumped over. He just took me by the hand and he said, "You stay here." So I was looking at him. He says, "Stay there." And I said, "Can my girlfriend come with me?" He said, "No. I haven't seen her again." At the time, I was sent to Bergen-Belsen, to a different hell. Bergen-Belsen, I found my sister-in-law again. So we promised each other from then on, we're not going to be separated. I was in Bergen-Belsen for 4 weeks. We had only a little bit straw, cement, and it was cold already, and a very, very thin blanket. But I was wearing the same dress what I was wearing in Auschwitz. Then came a selection, and I said to my sister, "Well, let's go. I don't want to stay here. If it's possible, if they will take us, let's go." So we were selected to go away. So we went let us have a shower and have another dress. And we went to Salzwedel.
So that was before you went to Salzwedel. They gave you another dress and a shower before you departed.
Yes, before we went to Salzwedel. We went to Salzwedel. We didn't know where we are going, but we came to Salzwedel, and so the German, what he came to select us, he was there. And he says, "Who is smart and educated, go in one place. And who is stupid, go to another place." Nobody moved. We didn't know where to go. So we stayed. We didn't move. So he says, "Well, if you don't want to move, I have to select you." So he selects us, and he says, he's looking and looking. He says, "Okay, you go here, you go there." But anyways, I was together with my sister-in-law at the time. I was assigned to a machine they showed me. They gave me a piece of iron, and I was working in an ammunition factory, making parts to airplanes. And I was very good at it. I followed the instructions and everything. And I gave out a lot of produce. So I was there till the liberation. We were working 12 hours a day. 6 in the morning we had to be at work at 6 in the morning. They woke us up 5. And we were working till 6, from 6 till 6 in the evening. And we had a night shift as well.
Were there men and women in the camp?
In the camp, only women. But at work, I was working with German together.
Okay. But the prisoners were all women in that camp?
Yes. Yes. They are all, there was all different kind of work. There's a lot of, I was working at 2 machines. One was making holes, so like for bullets, and the other one parts of the airplanes. So I was working there till the liberation. April 14, 1945, I was liberated.
Before we get to the liberation, because I do want to ask you about liberation, can you tell me a little bit more the difference between being in Bergen-Belsen and being in Salzwedel and the kind of living conditions? What was the difference between the two?
Well, Salzwedel, Salzwedel was much better than in Bergen-Belsen. The working camps, at least we didn't sleep on the ground. We had bunk beds in Salzwedel. We had 2 meals a day. In the morning, they gave us some bread. We had a soup as well at work. And sometimes we had another very small slice of bread when we came home from work. And at least we had a shower once a week, and you could wash up because there were about 6 people in one room. It wasn't so bad like in Bergen-Belsen or in Auschwitz.
Did you witness any cruelty or cruel acts committed by Nazis in Salzwedel?
Not in Salzwedel. Well, they were trying at work. At work, the people were saying, my boss was saying to the SS women, they are my people here, they are working people. In the camps, what you are doing to them is none of my business. But here, you're not supposed to touch them because they are giving out good production. We need them here.
So who was your boss? Was it a Nazi or was it?
I don't know if he was a Nazi, but he was a German.
Okay.
But I was working also together with some people, prisoners of war from France. And a lot of the German, well, I won't say that all the Germans were bad. Some of them had pity on us, but one was scared for the other. And the same thing, the women were worse than the men.
And what happened if people tried to steal food in Salzwedel?
Well, one coincidence, 2 women stole some food because for the winter, they put some preserves outside. They were putting some potatoes away so we can have some food. Some people went and they took them out and they were punished very badly. They were all beaten up. Their heads were shaved again. And when we came back from work, we saw them standing there with signs, I stole some potatoes. And they were standing there for a few days and then they were sent probably to Bergen-Belsen. Because I know, as a matter of fact, that there were selections as well in Salzwedel. Whoever got sick was sent back to Bergen-Belsen.
And how was your health in Salzwedel?
My health wasn't the greatest, but for some reason, I was the lucky one. I was saved in Bergen-Belsen. I had diphtheria in Bergen-Belsen and Salzwedel.
And how did you avoid being sent back to Bergen-Belsen or something happening to you even though you were ill?
It wasn't depend on me. It was depend on my boss. Because I think nobody could replace me at the work. Because when I came back to work, they put me to a different place that I could sit. And I was only there for a few days. And then they said, I'm sorry, you have to go back to your machine because we don't have anybody there who can do your job. But what we're going to do, you have a little crate, you can sit on it. But watch out for this guy from the office. When you'll see him, stand up and do your work. I did my job anyways.
So let's move forward a little bit to the liberation that you've already mentioned. Before the liberation happened, did you know that the war was changing course or that liberation was possibly coming?
Well, we didn't know exactly what happened. We did not know, but we knew one thing, that the German didn't have enough food as well at that time. And if they didn't have any food, they gave us less. but we still went to work. But one day we stayed, it was in April, and we went to work like any other day, and all of a sudden there was no power, and we didn't know what happened. So we were staying in the dark for an hour or so, and then we went back to the barracks. At the barracks, we had no lights again as well. So next day we didn't go to work, and we didn't know why we don't have the lights. Then we found out that the French people, what they were, their prisoners of war, they went to a different city, and they cut the wires, but there won't be any electricity because our camp was mined, it's supposed to blow up. Because the German knew that the liberation is very close, and they didn't want any Jewish people to survive.
And so it had been, they were trying to blow up the camp, and what you're saying is that there were some French that stopped that from...
Yes.
So when liberation, who were you liberated by?
I was liberated by the Americans.
And so can you talk about that moment of liberation when you saw the American troops coming in?
Well, we knew about 2 or 3 days before the American came in, because we went, there were some wires in the back of the factory where we had the barracks, and the French people came, and he says, be strong, in another 2 days you'll be liberated. So we didn't know what to think of it, that we'll be free. We didn't believe that we'll be free, that we'll survive, that we'll see the people, what maybe the loved ones, maybe somebody is still with us. But when the liberation came, we didn't know, we're jumping for joy. Everybody was kissing each other. We just didn't know what to do.
So when the Americans came and it was announced that you were liberated, what happened to you at that point? Because you have no money, you basically have no clothing. What did you do?
My sister all together. We had nothing. We had nothing. Well, then they took us to the different bar. You were allowed to go to the German houses at the time and take some stuff, whatever you want. So we did. I took some clothes. It didn't fit, but it was better than what I was wearing. And then they took us to the camps where the army was in Bergen-Belsen and Salzwedel.
So this is where the Nazi soldiers were staying.
Where the Nazi soldiers, yes.
Okay.
They took us there, and I stayed with my sister-in-law together in one room. And we didn't stay there very long because the British came over, and after that, the Russian came over. So you had a choice to go to Poland or stay on, to go to a different place. So I said to my sister-in-law, we don't have anybody in Poland, because my brother and father, they came with us to Auschwitz. If they survived, I'm sure there will be someplace in Germany. Even if they're in Poland, we'll find them. I don't want to go back to Poland. We suffered enough there. She says, we are right. You're right. So we stayed on, and we went to Braunschweig, to a different camp. It was a camp only for women. And there were some Poles in Polish uniforms. They were watching us. The life wasn't great there either. And we stayed there for a few months. And then some man came and he said, what are you doing here? look at the Poles. They're looking at you like, what are you doing? How come you survived the war? I said, go to Bergen-Belsen if you can. There's a Jewish community. There's a different life. So we decided we will go to Bergen-Belsen. So my sister-in-law and myself, we went to Bergen-Belsen. And there was a Jewish community. People came from all over. There were lists every day to find some people where they were lost during the war, who survived. And I found out that my sister is alive. Before that, I started to go to school and belong to an organization. And for a year, 1 year or so, I found myself back how I supposed to be.
So Bergen-Belsen at this point, just for the audience, now it's a displaced persons camp, correct?
Yes.
After the war. And
we stayed the same. We stayed where the Germans were staying, in the same place.
So you did not stay in the barracks that you had stayed in when you were a prisoner there?
No, it was a different place. It was 2 kilometers away. It was a different place altogether.
Oh, okay.
This was Bergen-Belsen, the other one was Belsen. It was a different place. But there was a Jewish community, and they helped us. We had the food from them because we didn't have anything. And they gave us some clothes, some blankets, some clothes, and whatever we need, whatever it was necessary, and there were some schools, so I went back to school, learned some Hebrew and Jewish,
Yiddish.
To read and write. And
How old were you at the time? How old were you?
I was 17.
And if I can have you just go back, can you explain how you found your sister?
Some men were traveling, and one time he says, you know what? I think I know where your sister is. I said, what? He said, yeah, I think I know where she is. And prior to that, my cousin came from England, and he left me some money, and I put it away. I gave it to my sister-in-law to hold it for me, to keep it for me. And then this man came back, and he says, I think I know where your sister, because my cousin was there as well, the shippers. They immigrated they were in Israel. Later on, they went to Israel. So I said, where, what? He said, well, she's on the American zone, I think. I'm not sure. And she's in a camp, and she has a child. I said, she has a child. I had no idea. When she left, I was 12 years old. And I had no idea where she was all this time. So I went to the Congress, and I said, I found my sister, and I need a passport. They say, you have to wait a month. I said, I'm not waiting even a day. He said, you cannot go from one place to the other, from the English zone to the American. It's the same thing like you would go from Canada to the United States. At the border, you have to show a passport. I said, I'm not waiting. I didn't tell them, but I was thinking, I said, I'm not going to wait. I'll go right away. The following day, my sister-in-law changed some for marks, what I gave her the money, and took a bus to the train station, and it was quite a distance where she was. It was 1,000 kilometers. I took the train all by myself, and I went to come. I was told that she is there, and I came. And I found her. So she was there with her son, with Sam.
That's my father.
That's your father. So you can imagine how happy we were together there. In the meantime, my sister got married in Bergen-Belsen. That was before. And I had no place where to stay. I was homeless at the time anyways. So I figured they'll put me to jail and I don't care. That's fine. I'll have a place where to stay. And I supposed to have the room in about a month. So I stayed with my sister for a month and I said, you're not going to stay here. I said, you're coming with me to Bergen-Belsen. I said, Sammy he will go to school and you'll find a job and we'll stay together. Well, she listened to me and we came to Bergen-Belsen. They didn't make a big thing at the border, so.
So you were able to bring your sister and her son with you back to Bergen-Belsen, and you
I
stayed
did.
in Bergen-Belsen. How long did you stay in Bergen-Belsen as a refugee camp after the war?
I stayed till 1948.
So how many years did you live in a refugee camp?
I was liberated in 45, so 43 years.
Yeah, so 3 years you were in a refugee
3 years I was,
camp.
yeah. And when we came, in 1947, I got married. And my husband was a tailor.
And you met him in Bergen-Belsen as well, in the refugee camp, correct?
Yes. You could do they had different trades in Bergen-Belsen. You could go to work there. My husband was working there. We came, so we stayed together and my nephew went to school there. He was little, but there were some preschools with children. The children came from different places, mostly from Russia. And because in Poland, little children didn't survive. Like some of them maybe they were in hiding. A lot of people were in hiding, and a lot of people gave away the children to Christians. And the people didn't survive and they stayed there. They didn't even know that they are Jewish people. A lot of children are in churches still, and they didn't know that they're Jewish. But we stayed there, and I got married in 1947.
In Bergen-Belsen.
In Bergen-Belsen.
So after leaving, so you basically left Bergen-Belsen and eventually went to Canada after leaving the refugee camp. Why did you go to Canada? Just for our American viewers, why did you go to Canada and not the United States or Israel?
Our intention was to go to Israel. That's why I was learning Hebrew. But we didn't have anybody in Canada, the United States, or Israel. We didn't have anybody anywhere. So some people came from Canada, and they need some tradespeople, tailors, shoemakers, furriers. And my husband was a tailor, and he passed the skill test. And he said, we'll go to Canada. It didn't make any difference to us. In the meantime, my sister got married. Otherwise, I wouldn't leave her by herself with a child. She got married and moved to Hanover. So I was free to do whatever I pleased. So it wasn't so easy to get to Canada. I went through a lot of doctors. They checked you over, you had to be healthy. Otherwise, they wouldn't let you into Canada. Finally, we came June the 18th in 1945. 1948, June 18, we came to Canada. It was a Friday. And we went to the union was a big place.
This is a tailor's union.
It's like a tailor's union. That's what we came from. That's what they were sent, and they gave us $20. We were the only two people what nobody came to visit. We were two people alone. We felt like orphans. Nobody came to us because we didn't have anybody. Everybody had aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, when they came ahead of time. My husband and I was 21 years old when I came to Canada.
Did you speak English at the time?
No, I speak Hebrew.
That's not going to get you far in Toronto.
And they gave us $20. They lent us $20. And they took us to a room, 442 Manning. And the landlady said, she spoke a broken English. And she says, for 1 week, einfach, 1 week. And she showed her the I had two $10 bills, and she took one. And we had $10. All we came here to Canada with 22 American packages of cigarettes. Our luggage hasn't arrived yet. Not that I had a lot in my luggage, there wasn't much. But I had a big garbage can. And they were saying in Germany that there wasn't enough sugar in Canada. So we bought some sugar, some other stuff. Some clothes we had. And a small suitcase for change of clothes. My husband had the cigarettes because they were playing on cards on the train from Halifax to Montreal. So he won some. Nobody had any money, so they playing on cigarettes. So we came to Canada, and my husband needs a haircut. All we did, we left the luggage. He showed us the room. We saw the number, we saw the street, and we went out to see who will find maybe some friends, maybe somebody from my family is here. I don't know. We didn't know who was here. We found some friends, but my husband needs a haircut. So he says, I see a barber shop here. I'll go in and I'll ask him if he'll take some cigarettes instead of money. So he went there inside, and there was one of the bosses. He owned a factory. And he said, he saw that she is a greenie. We just came. He said, when did you come? He said, today. He spoke Yiddish. And he says, you have a wife? He says, yes. And you want to go to work? He says, yeah, I came to work. He says, where do you live? So he told him where. And he says, I'll pick you up Monday morning, 8:00, and wait for me. I said, okay. Yes, you have children. First, you have children. No, because they don't want anybody with children here. Even it was very hard to find a room if somebody had a child. So 8:00 in the morning, on Monday morning, he came to pick us up, drove us to his factory. I had no idea how to sew. My husband knew how to sew. So I was supposed to make some bottoms and clothes, but they were not even. I had no idea how to do it. After one day, he said, you know what? You are not for me. Here you have to work piecework. You have to work fast, and you are not for me. So he gave us for the day $8. So I said, look, we have $8 and $10. We have $18. It's a lot of money. The following day, we went to the union again to look for a job. And people were coming back already, and he says, you don't have to go there. There are no jobs available. We have to go someplace else. He said, you know what? We are here. Why not? We'll go. My husband found a job. He was working in cook clothing. And They assigned me to a job, temporary job, to sew buttons. I had no idea I didn't know how to sew buttons, especially in a suit. You sew buttons different than on a blouse. My husband showed me, I was sewing the buttons. I stayed there for a month and I left. I couldn't take it. I went to a different factory to work with a friend of mine. There again, sew buttons. But not only to sew buttons, I was checking the clothes and everything. I was an examiner. It wasn't good. The lining was too long. I had to give it back to the people what they were sewing it. And then I didn't like that job either. I just couldn't sit in one place. So finally I found a job at Canadian Glass Ornament. This job I liked because I could move around. We're painting the Christmas ornaments. So I was working there for a little while. And then I was pregnant with my oldest son, Samuel. So I stopped working.
So Chuck, as an immigrant, you had to work really hard when you came to Canada, is basically what you're saying. It was hard.
Yes, and I did not take anything from the committee. I didn't take anything for you'll call it Jewish Federation.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't take anything. I didn't even know what the Jewish Federation is. Whatever I have is only from work. We didn't own anything. Anybody, we didn't buy, but we had to buy everything from scratch because we came with nothing. But
so Chuck, I'm going to ask you one more question because everybody wants to ask you questions. I'm sorry, Anna. So Chuck is aunt in Polish, and that's how I usually refer to my aunt, so I apologize. So Anna, I just want to ask you one more question, and then I want to open it up to the floor of all the participants. Why do you think it's important for people to hear your story and to learn about the Holocaust?
Let's hope that this won't happen again. I want to tell the people that they have to fight for their rights because we couldn't do it. We didn't know how to do it. We didn't have anything what to do it with. We went like the sheep to the slaughters. I'm telling the people not to do it, just to fight. And let's hope this horror won't happen again. That it will be enough. What I went through is enough for all the generations.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to give Anna just a minute. I would like to ask, if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function. So if you go on participant, there is an area to click on it to raise your hand, and then I'll take the questions in the order that they're given. So I'm going to start with Liat Cohen. I'm going to unmute you. You may have to unmute yourself when you do it. There you go.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. So my question is, you said that you and your family were very religious. So I was wondering if throughout the Holocaust you maintained your faith in God and or questioned religion at all.
Yes, we did. My mother didn't eat the meat, what they gave us, and I didn't eat it either. And from when I'm here in Canada for a number of years, I came in 1948, I keep a kosher home. I'm following my parents' footsteps. I light the candles every Friday and the holidays, and I'm going to the synagogue. But this year we didn't go because of COVID. That was the first year I didn't go.
But you did it on Zoom.
I did it on Zoom with you.
Mm-hmm. I see Matthew. I'm going to unmute you.
I would first like to say thank you very much for coming and giving this very in-depth explanation of your personal experiences. I cannot imagine how difficult it was to go through it and to explain it to us today. I would just like to ask, how do you cope with the unimaginable trauma that you experienced, and how do you continue to move forward and find happiness in life?
You have to do what you have to do. I still have nightmares sometimes, but I'm coping. I have two wonderful sons. I have two grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren, and I'm very happy with them. And they know everything what happened to me. But if you have to do it, you have to do it. You have no choice. You have to live with it.
Thank you. Just before I go on with the questioning, for students that are in courses, if you could just type anything like hi in the chat area so we can have all of your names for attendance, that would be really helpful. So you can just write hi if you want, or just something, just so I have your names for attendance purposes. Let's see, I have Troy Clayman has a question.
Hi. First off, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. It's never easy to talk about this kind of thing, especially when you've lost loved ones. But I wanted to ask, how did you react after immigrating to instances of neo-Nazis, such as the Skokie incident back in the, I think it was the 60s?
So Troy, Anna Holtzman lives in Toronto. So she's Canadian. So I don't know if, maybe if we can broaden the question maybe to anti-Semitic events happening in Canada or other places.
It did happen here. The neo-Nazis were starting to talk here. I went to the rally together with my husband, but they were beaten up at the time.
I'm sorry, what time period was that?
This, I think, this was in the 60s.
I have Thomas Nielsen has a question.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. I really don't think I've ever been touched by anything in the way that this is, spoken to me. And I wanted to ask you, are there any acts of humanity, of selflessness, of giving that really touched you back then and that have stayed with you today that you noticed while in the camps?
This will always stay with me.
I think he wanted to know if there was something that somebody helped you or did something for you in the camps that has stayed with you. Am I understanding that, Thomas? Is that your question? Oops.
Helped you over the whole.
Yes, that is my question.
That's his question. Was there something that somebody did, some type of kindness to you while you're in the camps that still stays with you?
Yes. I was sick in the camp, and one of the Germans brought me some ointments. I won't say that all Germans were bad. They were not. They were working together with us together. After the war, as a matter of fact, he came and he says, "I helped you. I wanted to help. Maybe you can help me as well." I said, "What can I do for you?" Then they didn't have enough food. I said, "Here, that's what I have, and I'll share with you." This was after the war in Germany.
Very interesting. Thank you, Thomas, for your question. I have Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It was very powerful, and thanks to Paula for letting me know about it. My question is, my cousin Hannah Perlstein, Sidonia Perlstein, was at the Bergen-Belsen displaced persons camp. I know there were a lot of people there. She also had a baby, Hannah, my cousin. And I was just wondering if for any reason you knew her or met her in the displaced persons camp.
No, I didn't.
Was it very crowded there?
Yes.
Okay.
And Bergen-Belsen was very, yes, it was, that was during the war.
After the war in the
After
displaced
war,
persons
yes.
camp, that's where she ended up. No.
No, they were different blocks. This was quite a big different. It was a big distance. You didn't know each other.
I see.
Maybe if I see a face, but not by the name.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know where she is now?
My cousin, Sidonia, has passed away several years ago. Her daughter, Hannah, lives in Connecticut. After the war, they were sent to Springfield, Massachusetts. My cousin, Sidonia, was a seamstress, and her daughter, Hannah, wrote a book about her called Sidonia's Thread, about her time in the Holocaust and afterward.
Oh, okay.
But thank you for that presentation. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Melanie. I have another question from Rocco.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. The way you described your story was very powerful, especially the way you described the way it happened to you in stages, and the way your perpetrators tried to strip you of your identity. First it was the ghettos, then it was the separation of your family. And it was very potent when you talked about the moment your head was shaved and that connection to your femininity was like shorn away. Like, that was incredibly powerful. And the thing that I'm taking away from your story is, were you aware? Like, when did it start to become aware? You become aware, like, that this it was going to. When did you know it was going to get as bad as it did? Like, was there any indication, like, that did you have any expectation that it would get to where it was?
No, we didn't have it. Had no idea what will happen to us. We didn't know anything. We were just brought over, and there were no TVs, when there were no radios. We had no communication with the outside world. We're just separated from everybody.
So thank you. I believe that's the last of our questions. I want to thank everyone for joining in on this call, and I especially want to thank Anna Holtzman for sharing a very personal story with all of us, but I think a very important one that we take with us. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.